Here we are, almost March, when we're filming this at the Proving Grounds. I'm going to bring on Chris Masters. Chris is the owner of Soil Pro Outdoors. And I was a big non-believer in his products when we met a couple years ago, but through testing, side by side and doing research testing, I've become a huge fan. Of course, I don't like to add fertilizers or herbicide unless necessary, and these natural microbes have made a big difference our place. Now, Chris and I can geek out on this stuff, but I want you to stay tuned all the way to the end of this episode if you're a food plotter, because there's going to be a lot of great information. Hey, Chris, thanks for hopping on here and taking time to join us this morning.
Good to be with you, Dr. Grant.
Yeah, and we've shared before, Chris and I started off with me saying no, and Chris was saying just give us a try. Because I've been burnt for years of people telling me, throw this magic dust out there and something will happen, where Chris has a valid product. So Chris, let me publicly apologize and appreciate your patience with me as we went through a couple of growing seasons of testing and seeing, and me saying, well, I guess that is true. It's not just a fluke. So thanks for your patience with me, Chris.
Yes, sir. Understandable.
Yeah. So Chris, we just set this up late last fall, because we were so dry. We didn't really get planting some stuff till November, just wicked dry. So to show any positive results when you're not planting until November and the length of the day is really short, not much sunshine, because without photosynthesis, nothing's happening. So you got some sunshine out there, cooler temperatures, plants start growing that fast. With Chris' insistence, again, we treated portions of food plots by a drone, so we know exactly where it was. It was mapped out, and didn't treat. We called those control areas. Everything's planted the same. Obviously, the soil type is likely not changing much in a few feet. The rain's not changing. Deer browse, all that stuff. In two different plots, or several different plots actually, and we're treating with, Chris, tell us what the treatment was. What were we doing?
So for that specific treatment going into the winter, we applied the SP Enhance, the SP Energy, and the SP Fuel. The intended goal there with that package was to raise Brix levels, sugars, starches, carbs going into the winter, so that way we'd have a greater response and rebound coming into this spring. So trying to do what preparation we could in those few days left, where we could get a little bit of heat, and then let that be our stepping stone and our foundation for this spring. We were basically adding an all-purpose microbial package with the Enhance product that's going to begin to quickly mineralize nutrients, as well as grab a hold of maybe nutrients that can sometimes get away from us free and mobile. So that was the SP Enhance product. We applied then the SP Energy product, which is also a microbial technology. And that allows us to bring in certain strains of bacteria and sugars that helps raise basically the content or the substrates, polysaccharides in the soil, which we all know roots, they need the interaction with the microbes and the critters, and they need to be having these food sources. And so that's where the energy, even its name, right? It's supplying energy as an instant push into the system. And then the fuel product is kind of just that last horsepower push. The fuel being, let's see if we can gain some force going into the winter. That product is a potassium-based product that we have also added some organic acids, enzymes, and pretty much those additives and biostimulants in there is helping make it more readily available to whatever it's hitting. And for you in that scenario, it was the cereal rye. And I think the numbers show that, all three of those in that package together was pretty impactful.
Yeah. And Chris, I want to point out here, as you and I have discussed in the field, these are natural. These are not something Chris and his staff created in a lab, with petri plates and stuff, trying to breed a super microbe. These are natural. If you think back to the, pre-European settlement, and I've shared in the past, I love reading those early explorer books, trappers, whatever, and they talk about the millions and millions of bison on the Great Prairie and how productive those soils were, and grass taller than a man sitting in a horse on a saddle, blah, blah, blah. We're talking about literally applying those type of microbes that were naturally in those soils before we started plowing and adding synthetic fertilizers. back to our degraded soil. Soil at my place is degraded. The soil at every property I've ever worked on has been degraded. We probably don't have any soil as good as it was at that time because of all the actions we've taken. Do you agree with all that, Chris?
Absolutely. I mean, it's one of these things whenever we even make the terminology regeneration, regenerative ag, that tells us just how far we've fallen, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's important, the reestablishment, the repairing. And, I think some people are just oblivious to even just what salt fertilizers can do, even if it's just 100 pounds of triple 13 or even the herbicide application. I was at a conference once and heard the Department of Ag, the Secretary of Department of Ag. There was a doctor who gave a speech about a herbicide. And at that time, it was Roundup. And this was back in the late 70s, early 80s. And one application of a herbicide, Roundup, has the residual factor up to 21 years in the soil.
Mm.
So if
Yeah.
you think about that, we would have to stop 21 years ago for that to even linger on. And that's just not possible. We've kind of made it a necessary evil at this point, right? And so we need to be able to repair and put microbes back in the soil that can, bind those things up, bring the soil health back up to a level to where, our nature and animals can truly feed on something that's of nutritional value. And it goes back to your gut health, my gut health, the animal's gut health. So what can we do? Even if it doesn't seem like we're that far gone, I can still say there's many times we see soil samples and they do need some help.
Yeah. And with RFK and all the current news coming out of DC, people might think this is just a new fad, but you've been doing this for years. Tell us a little bit. I mean, you recognized this long ago before RFK was a household name. You've been doing this a long time.
So, in 2009, 2010, 2011, we started to take a dive about soil imaging and seeing, even in the conventional world of farming, what was missing. And, at that time, back even in the early 90s, it was mycorrhizal fungi on seed. How do we build these communities? And, it's grown and evolved into having lab procedures that show us just a screenshot or a snapshot of how far the soil has gone in the balance and getting things out of balance. We've been doing this for 13, 15 years. And what we'll do is we'll take advances in the technology, see which ones are improving the best. And then if we keep adding to that. So every year we're trying to make the product and the technology stronger than it was the year prior. So even 4 years ago, things looked different on our end about the end product. And so we decided to take our expertise and our knowledge, condense that down into something that food plotters, landowners, management, those spring applications, fall applications. And that's why we have built what we feel is the strongest microbial products, which is the enhanced product and the compost product that does, the degrading and decomposing. But, this has been years and years of data collection, responses in production, and then rolling that over into, food plot.
So Chris' real job and what he does a bunch of is work with production ag farmers to restore that land, regenerate that land. One thing before we get into my numbers here from my place is I remember you telling me you work with, and I actually know the guy that had produced some world record corn yields or big record corn yields by just pouring all kinds of fertilizer and herbicide and fungicide, insecticide, whatever aside there was out there, he was using it. And then his soil become not very productive. And we talk about adding all these salts and everything to there. He really made that soil kind of toxic, got with you, started healing the soil through your products. You run with that from there. You were able to really reduce the amount of cost he was putting in, go back to some high yields by using these natural systems.
Yeah, it was kind of comical at the beginning of the relationship there because he had been using, not only synthetic fertilizer, but also tons of chicken litter. They had houses and it was free basically, right? So it was not uncommon for him to put 3, 4, 5 tons of litter. Mm-hmm. And whenever we met, he said, this is going to be the greatest, as far as conventional farming, these numbers are going to be off the charts, the litter, everything's. So I ran the numbers. I called him back and he said, how good are they? And I said, well, really, I mean, you're middle of the road. It's not really that great. And he said, there's no way. I said, you understand the feed that is being fed to the animals and the chickens, they're defecating that, and that's penicillin, right? So you're basically taking bleach that's coming through a litter through the animal, and now it's going on your soil, and the byproduct is hurting your own soil. So then we begin to look at that and repair that. And, this last year, now working with them for 6 years, they said they had the second highest national corn record in the United States.
Wow.
Yeah, phenomenal return, and very, very conscious now of, he raised 363 bushels of corn, and synthetic nitrogen, he only had 161 pounds of synthetic nitrogen. No phosphorus, no potassium. And all we did was just these continual, applications throughout the season. So that type of science and technology is being packed into a special package just for these guys with food plots and grasses, soybeans. And so I think many are going to see the acceleration of their soils. And, again, the browse pressure, the deer quality, the herd. And that's just what we want to be a part of. How can we help influence one little piece that they're doing to help the end goal?
Yeah. So just a quick summary there. Record corn yields, lower input costs, less fertilizer, lower costs, so way more profit.
Right.
Healthier soil. And for us food plotters, less costs and, going really heavy with some kind of standard nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium fertilizer, whatever else you're doing out there, and more tons of forage produced. Now, let's be real, folks. You got a 1/4 acre food plot in the middle of 3,000 acres of woods.
Yeah.
You spray all of Chris's products, or you apply all of Chris's products on there, it's still probably be about this tall because the deer are going to like it so much. It tastes so good. Healthier plants taste better for me and you, and for deer too. It's going to get this tall. That's why I tell everyone, use a utilization cage. We do at our place. Put a wire basket 3 or 4 foot across in diameter out there so you can see how tall the plants are really growing and how tall they are outside the cage where there's browse pressure. So well, gosh, that did do some good. Those plants, even though they look like they're this tall, produce more tons. The deer just kept them browsed off, and I was getting great value out of my efforts to do that. So enough of that. That's great. So Chris, we're not going to go through all this because it's really detailed, folks. We'll put some screenshots on here, but and when I say, man, I'm just showing you a part of it. I mean, there's a lot of numbers here to go over. But Chris, as a deer biologist, some stuff that caught my eye was on the treated and not treated. Again, just a few feet apart here. Well, starch. Starch might not sound like something really critical to deer, but starch is energy, right? When you're going into winter, you put on fat. Genetically, you're predisposed to store as much fat on your body as you can because that's your food through the winter. Like here, we just got through 8 inches of snow. It's about melted off now. And if your deer got a big layer of fat on the back, they can cruise through that no problem. If there's skin and bones going in that, it's really stressful. They may or may not perish, but they're certainly not coming out in the spring in good health. And that means reduced fawn survival, reduced antler growth. So starch is huge. And by my math, in the treated versus untreated areas, the treated had an 84% increase. That is amazing. Can you explain how that even happened? How do we have an 84% increase? I mean, everything's planted the same. The field is planted. We just simply treated, sprayed. This is a liquid product here and didn't right here next to it. 84% increase. That's amazing. What happened there, Chris?
We make the statements, we need the sun's help, right? But December the 12th, when we applied that, there's not many sunny hours. And one of the things I stress to a lot of people, you could have the greatest product next to sliced bread, but if the plant can't drink it, it's of no value. Okay, we're ready. So a lot of this is delivery. And whenever you take something from inside of the plant and you're spraying something on the outside that is also mimicking or very similar, the plant is able to drink that and consume that. And so what we were able to do with the microbial inputs and, the potassium is basically get it into the plant a lot quicker, take advantage of those few hours that we had during the day, and what production was going on just really became intensified by 3x, 4x, 5x, to the point to where those small amount of hours had the biggest productivity. And that's where the natural sunlight, also, again, the chlorophyll formation production, there's a certain sector of microbes that's really all they do, right? They take a little bit of the sun and they intensify things. And that's kind of in that application, 84% increase in starches. I mean, that's phenomenal at the end of the day. And not only for that moment there, but whenever we get into this spring, that plant's going to respond a lot quicker to that sunlight. And, Grant, one of the things that we're seeing as of right now, too, is wherever we have this higher response, and we're seeing it not only with the starches, but we're seeing it with the plants, soil temperatures in the spring are generally showing us 2 to 3 to 4 degrees warmer. And I'm sure you've seen this as well. And that goes back to the health of the soil and the communities that are in that soil. So that's another benefit, right?
Chris, we've actually seen here, and it took me a couple of years to really believe it, I guess, but right when it's starting to snow, you're going, is the ground turning white? Is it not? The kids are going, are we going to get out of school? That kind of stuff.
Right.
Okay. And then you get a little bit more. The ground's certainly white. We have seen it here where the ground is white and our food plots are neon green because they're actively growing faster than the native vegetation next to it.
Sure.
And when plants are actively growing, they're literally respirating more. You and I are breathing more, right? So the plants are respirating more, creating heat, which keeps those little critters in the soil active and warmer, not going as deep as quick. All this just goes for more tons, better tasting plants, healthier deer down the line. It's a continual system. You're either going negative or positive. You can't go both ways at once usually. So
exactly.
That's big. And to follow that along, starch, of course, the next is glucose. Folks, glucose is the world's simplest energy or sugar. If you go to the hospital, usually the first thing you do is get an IV.
Yeah.
Most of those IVs will be a glucose base. There'll be salt and glucose, right? This is about the first thing the hospital puts in your arm. As a kidney transplant, I've had that too many times, so I know that, right? So our glucose levels went from it again. Now this is December, so you wouldn't expect much. In the not treated, it was ND. They couldn't pick it up. It just wasn't happening. Treated was 6.8 dry weight. That's a percent of, so 6.8% of that plant, the clipping we took, they take all the moisture out, was glucose. That is huge.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to store fat, sugar, glucose, fat, it all goes together. That is huge.
I mean, you think about the consumption in that time period, depending upon how aggressive the rut was, things of that nature. You're talking about what can we do for the winter, even to sustain ourselves and store ourselves whenever you have tonnage of forbs and, grasses that are packed with higher sugars, glucose. It's the most readily available, right? And we all need it. And just to see that show up in the field for that time period makes me think, what if we would have done this 2 weeks before, right?
Yes.
And you take advantage of the scenario for what it is, but even in that window, you have a story to tell on your own farm, your own property there. This is what we saw. And just like other guys, they would see the same thing. So yeah, it's just a phenomenal number to look at and see that we were non-detectable to now having something show up.
Chris, let's turn that a little bit back to the deer hunter world. So I have multi-mobile cameras. I was looking at the app this morning. I've got bucks with antlers still. We just came through negative temperature degrees, -5, -3, a couple of nights in there. I know that's not Minnesota, but that's code for an Ozark boy or an Ozark deer. I'm in the Ozark Mountains. They're not going to a local cornfield and eating, right? This is rocks, sticks, and whatever native vegetation. And we have 31 or 32 acres of food plots on 900 acres of land. So they're not just wallowing in a food plot every day at my place. And for bucks to still be holding antlers, here we are almost March, is a really good testimony to the health of a deer herd when we just come through a wicked drought. Remember, we didn't get the plant seal right till November. We didn't treat this till December. So tough conditions. I would have thought last fall, more bucks are going to shed really early this year because stressed out deer drop their antlers. There's a cost of energy to carrying antlers around, folks. And bucks shed those as they become stressed. The testosterone level drops below a certain threshold, the antlers come off. So we've got bucks still carrying antlers. I'm sure a lot of people do, but this is the Ozark Mountains, really low quality habitat on a really harsh year, going from a drought to a pretty cold winter. So that's an observation. We can't measure that with stats, but that's an observation that I think is telling. We go on down our test results here, lysine, which is a big fancy word. Chris, just, again, at simple level, what is lysine and what does that mean to a deer or even a human?
Protein. It's substance, right? And it doesn't matter whether we're trying to build or whether we're trying to repair. We all need protein. You think about guys who are athletes or, lifting weights, they're basically shredding their muscle. They have to repair with something, and that's protein. They're taking protein bars or they're measuring their protein daily. Same thing's going to happen to these deer, whether they're does, lactating does, right? They have to put on the milk to feed, and they need protein as well. And deer, not only just with the antler development, but protein is paramount. I mean, that's essential.
Critical for antler growth, obviously fawn development. Bucks by that time had just come through the peak of the rut. They're in horrible shape, but most bucks will lose about 30% of their body weight. So they've lost a lot of muscle mass. You see that in the necks decreasing in size and all this stuff. Bucks lose 30% on average, based on university research, of body weight during the rut. That's amazing. That's a 200-pound deer going down to a 140-pound deer.
Wow.
I tell people all the time, the rut diet is if you walk 20% more and eat 20% less. That's basically what bucks do. They move about 20% more during the rut based on GPS collar studies and stop to eat about 20% less. I call that the rut diet. And if I would walk more and eat less, I will lose weight too. Lysine was up 55%.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to put this in real world terms. You got your protein feeder, you're out there every week, every 2 weeks, pouring bags of protein in there that's really expensive and it's not natural. I don't think anyone goes, well, I want to sell her that feeder and kill a deer today. They'd rather see a nice food plot or native vegetation or something. Raccoons, squirrels, birds are eating half of that. It's flying off, going out in the coon's belly, whatever. We simply made an application of this and we got a 55% gain in a real simple plant, cereal rye. That's the clipping we took. Really simple plant. We have a blend planted, a green cover blend planted, but we planted so late due to the drought and it was so cold. The other plants are starting to come on now in these warm days, but they weren't showing much when you were here in the fall. It was harsh conditions, folks, really harsh. So 55% increase in protein in a simple plant. We're not talking a fancy clover or alfalfa or soybean. In cereal rye in December is hard for me to grasp.
I think too, when you look at it from that perspective as well, you referenced the quarter acre guy before with the quarter acre plot, 55%, that's adding nearly a 2x value, close to that, right? So that quarter acre, based on the protein content, is turning out to a half acre now. And a 2 acre is now going to a 3 acre, and so on and so forth. You're building and you're still got the same land size, but it's the fact that nutritional value has increased so much. You've impacted your whole operation, whether the guy only has 20 acres of hunting property and, maybe an acre of food plots, or he's got a couple hundred acres. Again, that's another indicator, observation to show not only is the soil health important, but it is paramount to getting the right nutrition into our deer so that way they can, successfully grow, develop, and give us that 2-3 years down the road. I know some of these guys, love those antlers. And I think, if you're looking 3 years down the road, if you could start now, prep the soil, get the best feed value out there, what's to come, right?
We're going to end on this. I did some work in New Zealand and they taught me we need the does in great health to have healthy fawns, and then that produces the best antlers that many years down the road. Or Mississippi State has done great work where they've taken what people consider small deer from coastal barrier islands in Mississippi, little hunks of sand out in the ocean, not much quality nutrient there. Brought them up to Mississippi State Research University, didn't let them interbreed with any other deer from other areas. And in 3 generations of a quality diet, those deer look like deer from the Delta, all soybeans, great soil on the Mississippi River. it wasn't a genetic thing. Their work was to see, is this a genetic thing or nutrition thing? It was absolutely a nutrition thing. I tell people
Yeah.
all the time, it's not genetics, it's nutrition. And I'm so thankful you were patient with me so we could finally see the light, take the scales off my eyes and partner here so we can get better nutrition in the tough soils we have here in the Ozarks. And not just here, my good friend Tyler Warren down in Mississippi, I got him linked up with you, and he didn't have that great of soil either. He's in northern Mississippi, and he's been sending me pictures of his food plots, and he's warmer. I'm gonna, 2 weeks ahead of us in growing time or something like that, and his plots are starting to pump and look good. So
Hmm.
you're going to be seeing Chris on Growing Deer a lot more as we go through this, and we're continue testing. Chris and I both believe in transparent science, showing what's going on. When we get the real spring green up here, we're not there yet here in the Ozarks. We'll probably pull some more samples, see what's going on, and come back. Chris, I want to thank you for taking time early on in our relationship to be patient with me and now to explain all this. And I'm super excited. We'll be planting our spring plots here May, something like that, and we'll be applying your products again, have you back out to walk everyone through that. And I'm looking better soil health, better plant health, and therefore better deer herd health.
Looking forward to it, Dr. Grant. Appreciate the relationship. And again, it's exciting. Look at the numbers, but at the end of the day, we see it visually with our own eyeballs as it's playing out in the field. So looking forward to it. Thank you again. And until next time.
Chris and I both would like everyone to realize that these natural systems, these are natural products. This isn't something like, you spill some bad herbicide or even fertilizer. You know how caustic fertilizer is. It will rust
Yeah,
out the fertilizer buggy. You don't even want to get it on your skin much, right? This
right.
stuff, you can pour it on your hand, it's no big deal. It's a
Yeah,
non-issue. Chris has told me I like to garden. I can put it on my garden with no issues. Is that correct, Chris?
that's correct. Yeah, just a little bit to a gallon mixer. Lightly mist your plants around your flowers, your shrubs. Yeah, does
Yeah.
well.
You may see me growing bigger too. All right. So this is all good. Hey, even more important than growing better food plots is growing our relationship with our believer. Chris and I want you all to know that. And we would like everyone out there to take time to really seek the Creator's will for your life and apply it daily. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.